Welcome to Planet People, a podcast that aims to inspire curiosity and cultivate a deeper connection with the natural world. I'm Natalie Jane, a conservation biologist, eco-communicator, and the host of this podcast series. And I am thrilled to be sharing stories with you that highlight the beauty and importance of protecting our planet's wildlife. Hey everyone, and welcome to Planet People, episode 4 of our coastal conservation series. And I am so excited to have two guests today, Nicole and Angel, power couple. We are so excited to have both of you. Nicole and I know each other through our master's program through Miami, Ohio University in the Project Dragonfly program. And I've been so lucky enough to watch Nicole grow as a student and marine biologist in this space. And she is also an environmental educator as her full-time role, and very passionate about surfing and all things marine life. And Angel, pronouns they, them, is a storyteller and documentary producer, and just produced a film this past year, or has been a year now of the film.
Yeah, it's been
It's been a full year. It's incredible. Diving for Rays is their film together, and it's an incredible story about queer conservationists and their role embracing marine biology and what that looks like in protecting shark species and ray species, most importantly rays. So thank you so much for joining, and we can't wait to get the interview going.
My name is Nicole. I have any pronouns, and I work with a local organization called Outdoor Outreach, where I connect youth to the transformative powers of the outdoors. And I'm also a marine science educator and conservationist. And I met Natalie actually through our graduate program, where we are getting our respective masters in conservation and biology. And yeah, I think that sums it up.
Yeah.
My name is Angel. My pronouns are they, them. I'm Nicole's spouse and also a natural history filmmaker. I'm a full-time editor at a production company called Days Edge Productions, and I also wrote, directed, produced, and edited a film called Diving for Rays alongside my friend Nova West about Nicole's journey to becoming a marine scientist. So
Incredible. Well, we can't wait to share your story. And thank you so much for all the work that both of you do to advocate for our marine environments, especially in San Diego County and beyond. So, welcome to Planet People. We're so excited to have you on board. So, what inspired you, Nicole, to pursue a career in conservation? I know right now your role is as an environmental educator, doing a lot of outreach with underserved youth in San Diego County. So, what does that look like for you? What does your day to day look like, and what inspired you to pursue that?
Yeah, definitely. So, um, I think like the thing that inspired me to pursue this is I honestly just kind of followed the things that I love the most in this world. And among those things are like ocean-based activities. So like surfing and swimming. And I also just love wildlife so much. Growing up in San Diego, it was always like really accessible for me, and I'm really grateful for that. And, growing up, the ocean also really felt like a safe space for me. It was kind of like a haven. And so as I got older, I really learned to appreciate it and really wanted to find a way to continue to not only connect to the wildlife and to the ocean, but to also potentially facilitate some of those connections, which led me really naturally into just like conservation education and facilitating spaces for youth around San Diego who maybe don't always have access to these spaces. I actually recently just got a promotion. So yeah,
Congratulations.
thank you. Yeah, so I'm now kind of more behind the scenes, just like supporting people in supporting like our programs team and figuring out which program partners we want to engage and figuring out just sort of like where there is a need, how we can fill it, and where we can find funding. So kind of more on the back end of things, but I still really like it actually.
That's
So
awesome. Well, thank you for all that you do to get the youth involved with marine conservation, and environmental education is so important, especially for this next generation, to really connect people to their local community and local wildlife, and learn how to be a planet person, right? Just like us. And you don't have to be a scientist to do that either. So it's really just getting involved and getting out in nature and connecting and creating curiosity, because there's that element of curiosity as a child that sometimes we lose in adulthood, and facilitating that connection to inspire curiosity for nature is so important. So thank you so much for all that you do for San Diego County, and I'm inspired by you, and I love your work as an environmental educator. I feel like, we have sort of a role reversal. Like, I'm in the field more doing the biology piece, and I wanted to do marine biology 5 years ago before stepping into like a consulting position. But I hear your stories and I'm like, oh, I want to do what she's doing. Like, it's so cool. And I like that about like our friendship too, because we can learn from each other in that way. And it's fun. And I loved going out in the field together last summer for our school project too, when we went birding for common terns, or least terns, actually. That was fun. So how do you two share a connection with the ocean? And how do you share that with your friends, your families, and what does that look like?
Yeah, I think that kind of differs for each of us. I think our
Mhm.
ocean relationships are very different.
Mhm.
Cool.
Yeah, yeah. And so I think for me, I know that whenever I talk about the things that I love, I inherently kind of like light up about it. And it's really like I become really passionate, and it really, I think, rubs off on people in a really good way. And so for me, it's just like talking about it and getting excited about it and sharing it, like it with friends, family, or youth on programs.
Mhm.
And so it's really natural for me to share about it. But that's totally not totally different, but I think Angel, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it took you a little bit of time to get to where you are now.
Oh, for
In
sure.
what
Yeah.
capacity?
So I grew up in Arizona, which
I
is
didn't know
very obviously not near the ocean whatsoever. And so whenever I first moved here to San Diego, it took me like a kind of like a long while to get comfortable in the ocean,
that.
just
Mhm.
because I was so like when you don't grow up near it and when you're not used to it, it's really terrifying. It's really scary.
I agree.
Yeah, especially we were doing like a lot of surfing and stuff like that at first.
Mhm.
Um, but after like a year or so, of like just like getting out there, learning how to exist in the ocean, and also
Yeah,
being
right.
married to someone who is glued to the ocean at all times.
Nicole
Uh,
is our mermaid.
Nicole is our mermaid, yes. So I had to learn quickly, but I'm glad that I did because I mean, like now, like I love the ocean.
I
I haven't been
know.
able to go in it for actually like quite a few months. I just recently had top surgery in July, and so
Congratulations.
thank you. So I've been out for a little bit, which makes me sad, but
Oh, wow.
yeah,
How long have you been out of so I guess since July then? You
July.
haven't been in the water? Wow. I didn't know that
Yeah,
top surgery required such a long period of wait.
it yeah, technically I could have gotten back in like I think they said 6 to 8 weeks after the
Okay.
surgery. But I just timed it so poorly where I got my surgery in like the summer and then now it's
Yeah.
cold. And
Well,
I I have the wetsuit for it. I could get over it and just get in there,
sure.
but you
Hey,
know.
timing is everything, right?
Yeah.
Well, I'm
But
sure the ocean can provide so much healing, though, because now you can embrace this new identity in a space that has no boundaries, no gender norms. And that's something that I definitely want to talk about in this episode today is your story as queer conservationist in the space, because queer ecology is so important and it's so cool. I
yeah.
mean, there's so much to like still learn and uncover about it. And um, just like how we exist with those natural spaces like the ocean, and getting comfortable, because sometimes I'm still even a little bit uncomfortable. I mean, I didn't grow up by the water, and it's so cool, Nicole, that you did, and that you guys can share such a special bond together in the ocean. And I know you made the documentary together, and I can't wait to get to that in the episode too. There's so many exciting things to talk about. I always like to ask people this, childhood experiences that you feel like really influenced wanting to pursue marine biology for your master's program, Nicole, and creating this documentary together, which, by the way, is called Diving for Rays, and you can find it on WaterBear Network. And we'll plug all that information and talk about it more towards the end of the episode. But yeah, just any like inner child moments that you feel like still spark your curiosity, like certain, yeah, moments in your life.
Yeah, definitely. I think for me there's always I touched on this earlier, but I think for me growing up the ocean was a safe space. And so like what I mean by that is like my family would often go to the beach, or like I have this like distinct memory of going like tide pooling as a kid in like pre-K. And I just I found that I was in awe of like the tide pools that I had access to at the time, right? I was like 5 years old, right? I'm not gonna go like swimming out in the ocean, but the tide pools themselves were so fascinating. And I think that was one of those key moments where like I remember like scooting along like the tide pools and like trying not to step in them. And my friend found an octopus and like we all rushed over, right? And it was that moment where I like first remember really feeling like a sense of like wonder.
Oh,
Kid.
love
And
that.
yeah, it was really amazing. And to this day, I still love the touch pools. Like anytime I go to an aquarium, I'm definitely in the touch pool area for like maybe too long. And yeah, so it kind of started there and it grew as I got older. My family just like got a little bit more dysfunctional the closer we got to the beach. And so what
Mhm.
happened was I would have some like rough family things going on, and I could just go for a run and run to the beach, and
Mhm.
I would just stay there and sit and process. And for me, a connection to the ocean is also a connection to self, like truly a place where I connect to the wholest versions of myself. And so, yeah, it's still a place where I go to feel safe and good and connect with myself in the ocean. So,
It's
yeah.
incredible. Thank you
Yeah.
for sharing those inner child moments that really made you who you are, because I do feel like you are one with the ocean, especially when you're diving for rays.
Yeah.
Flash your tattoo.
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. Oh my god, it's a manta
So
ray!
cool. No, it's great. That's
Yeah,
awesome. So you guys must frequent the La Jolla tide pools often then, huh?
Mhm.
for sure.
Do you take your kids tide pooling through your environmental ed work?
Yeah, I'm actually going in a couple weeks, and I'm really
Oh,
excited.
fun. Yay. That's awesome. How fun. Your job is so cool. So I feel like you've had these inner child moments, right? And now you're doing a lot of environmental ed in your career and you seem to be very fulfilled by that. But now you've been taking it to the next step since you've applied for the master's program. And I love your master plan. And for those listening, her master plan is focused on ray conservation. If you want to elaborate on, yeah, this kind of next chapter of like making your inner child happy with doing ray conservation. So I know you had that experience over the summer. Feel free to talk about what your research has been look like with the race.
Yeah, yeah. So because there is such limited research on rays in general, I've had to kind of broaden myself a little bit to doing elasmobranchs, which is sharks and rays. And so I have they're really really similar biologically. Some people like casually or fun lovingly refer to sharks or refer to rays as flat sharks, which is like
I've
just
never heard that
funny, weird
before. That's
term. Yeah,
interesting.
so a lot of what I'm learning, a lot of the biology that I'm learning is just through things that have been found out about sharks. And then usually I get like a little bit of ray information. And so I'm trying to scrounge together like a good thing that supports the conservation of both species. But I think it really speaks to one of the key points that I would like to touch on, which is that rays are so understudied. And that was one of the reasons that I wanted to focus on them. But it's hard to find a thing that I want to focus on when it's like we have such limited understanding of them. It's kind of it was really hard for me to know where to start. One of the things that I've been trying to focus on like recently is like shark and ray evolution for that class that we're in.
Right.
Uh, and there's a lot of similarities there. Like I could go on and on about it, but
Feel
um,
free to. I mean, I know you did that research over the summer too. You're all about the race. Like I love that you have such a focal point on them. It's really
yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons I do have a focal point on them too is I've talked a lot in this like podcast about how like at the end of the day I have this like loving connection to the ocean, but I think my like focus in on shark and ray like research is because I see that they're really like misunderstood in many ways.
Mhm.
One of the reasons that I wanted to focus on them is in Southern California, which is where I am.
Mhm.
There's a lot of stingray like stings that happen every day actually, to the point where one of the leading shark scientists in this area, his name is Chris Lowe, estimates that there's about like 10,000 a year,
That's a lot.
uh, Southern California. Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy actually. It's absolutely bananas that this is happening so much. And so there's this huge potential for us to like educate the public on this and to really kind of change a lot of the misconceptions that we have both with rays and then also by extension sharks. A lot of people, the youth that I work with, are really afraid of sharks. And what I found after talking with them a little bit is it's not really a fear of the wildlife itself. Whenever I explain kind of like their like biological adaptations and kind of why things happen, a lot of the times I find that they're just afraid of the unknown. The ocean is vast, and to be stepping into it and to not know what's beneath you is really intimidating.
It's
And
scary.
it's yeah, it's really intimidating. And so a lot of the work that I want to do is to try to change those misconceptions and to honor that like that fear is valid, and maybe it's not a fear of wildlife, it's a fear of not knowing, and that's a totally human thing. Uh
Absolutely, and that's where the education piece comes in.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So
People
that's
don't know, people can't care about what they don't know about.
yeah, and it's hard to care for something that just has a lot of bad press. You know? Yeah, and so I think and I think is like from a queer ecology perspective, right? I think being a queer person and having some experience with some LGBT plus bad press, it kind of gives me a lot of empathy and like understanding and really inspires me to sort of like change a lot of these misconceptions. So
Oh, wow, it's really beautiful that you have this parallel empathy for understanding the misconceptions, and you wanna support these animals in the same way that you wanna support queer ecology and yourself and your relationship to the ocean. It should all just be in unison and harmonious, and it can be that way if people just learn and know how to do the stingray shuffle, which I know is one of your target behaviors to change, right, for people going into the ocean.
yeah, definitely. It's all connected. It all feeds into each other. Yeah, it's all
Totally,
important.
totally.
Yeah.
Angel, are you obsessed with rays now too?
I do like them more. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's I love that Nicole's doing this too because you would think that there'd be more like public education about just how to maneuver yourself around marine life in San Diego specifically because
Mhm.
I think correct me if I'm wrong, but San Diego is one of the most like biodiverse places in the United States, like specifically
Definitely.
like the marine life. There's just so much of it. There's so many rays here, like so many stingrays. And the way that I found out about the stingray shuffle was just through Nicole. Like the
Mhm,
and
of course.
I have friends that move here or like are new to the ocean and like they don't know about the stingray shuffle and I'll just like mention it. And it's more of like a you learn it through word of mouth kind of a thing, but
Oh,
like it
totally.
really should not be that way. Like there should be signs, there should be like more public education about not just the stingray shuffle, but like just how to behave
Yeah, right?
and how to what to watch out for and things like that. But yeah, I think before meeting Nicole and before like, Nicole really got into this, like even I was like probably a little afraid of like stingrays and sharks and stuff,
Oh,
but
yeah,
now they're not as scary. So I
right.
enjoy it a little more.
Well, there you go. Now she's encouraging us to not be fearful of what we don't know, but rather learn about it and teach other people about it. And signage is definitely an important first step to kind of initiating that behavior change so people can learn. And that would be really cool if you could put up signage. I know you're talking about a QR code or even a mural, a wildlife mural would be so cool. Coral, my creative director on the call, is has always wanted to paint a conservation mural. So maybe we could like get some sort of cool ocean landscape going where we could
That would
paint
be
leaf
amazing.
terns with sea lions and rays in the ocean. Like there are plenty of wall spaces in La Jolla that are honestly kind of ugly. Okay, so you mentioned the stingray shuffle as sort of that target behavior and action item that people can do before they enter the ocean, so they can, be in a provide themselves with a safe experience and not harm wildlife. So, what does the stingray shuffle look like? How do you do it? Can you show us, like, with your hands or do some sort of movement?
Yeah, yeah. I'll show you with my hands, but I'll also kind of like describe it because I know some of y'all are just listening and may not have access to the video. And so what that looks like is have any like I'm going into educator mode. I'm so sorry.
I love
I was about to
educator mode,
say
Nicole.
call and response educate. No. uh, so let me think about this more practically. Okay, so when you are a kid and you have siblings, one of the things you might want to do is mess with them. And one of the ways you can do that is by gathering static in your socks. And the best way to do that, if you have experience messing with like your siblings or your friends, is to shuffle your feet along the carpet when you have socks on, to gather a lot of that static. And then, it built up. It's the same thing for the stingray shuffle. It really is just keeping your feet flat on the ground and moving forward to where they stay on the ground at all times. The reason that this is important is stingrays can't see very well, and actually not a lot of sharks can see very well, and some of that has to do with their eyesight. But also, if you've ever been snorkeling and the visibility is not great, you know that the visibility is not consistent in the ocean. And so another reason that we do this is to just communicate without having to rely on visual stimuli. And so sharks and rays have these really, really cool thing. Angel calls them, what do you call
I
them?
call them Tagliani Spagliato.
Tagliani. Tagliani. They can
Fascinating.
never remember the name. What we're actually referring to is the ampullae of Lorenzini. And what this means is that there are these tiny little pores that are on the nose of sharks and rays. And they're actually really, really good at sensing electromagnetic changes. They also have a lateral line, which allows them to pick up changes in water pressure. And so what this allows them to do is sense that you're coming into their space and move out of the way. The other thing that happens is it literally prevents you from stepping onto a stingray, which is often where their reflex will kick in and their tail will come up and get you. Yeah, and so it prevents it on so many levels. One, it's like you're communicating the best way that you can with the species that can't see you, and two,
Right.
it literally prevents you from stepping on them. The other thing that I want to mention is there's going to be someone who is hearing me talk about the stingray shuffle and getting stung and with the barb, and someone's going to think Steve Irwin.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, I want to just address that. I freaking love Steve Irwin.
Of course.
I grew up with him just like so many people that are probably listening. And what I want to say is that there has been like one other person in all of history that has died from a stingray sting like that. So that really was like a freak accident that is probably never going to happen.
Oh.
Um, it's really unlikely, and it's really unfortunate. And so I do want to address that. Like that's not a very common thing. Like you are more likely to get hit by lightning, to get bit by a human in New York. Like there could keep going. Like there are so many other things that are more likely to happen that are so wild. So I just want to confront that and kind of.
Thank you, because that's probably a lot of fear for most people who think of rays and getting stung by them. I mean, that was a pretty tragic accident that happened, and albeit he was in their environment and maybe was too close, but it's still definitely a freak accident and definitely maybe something that comes to mind when people think of a stingray.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, which is what you're here to do, is to change that and provide a safe space for people and raise. And that can be, those two actions can really, be beneficial to us, yeah, in the ray. So thank you for addressing that for sure. Hopefully everyone listening now knows what to do when they're entering the ocean to avoid getting stung by a stingray. When I first moved to San Diego, Angel, I had a similar experience as you, where I just had heard it through word of mouth, right? Like, oh, make sure you do the stingray shuffle when you go in the water. I was like, what? What is that? Like, I'm from the East Coast. I had never heard that term before when I went to the beach. It's not as prevalent as a problem, which also speaks to how biodiverse San Diego is in general, especially the marine life. I know you've mentioned, how the ocean is a safe space for you, and it's been a healing place and a place for you to get inspired, teach, and all of these things. But how has it also been a place where maybe you've encountered some challenges in your career, in yourself, together? What does that look like as you've stepped into your queer conservationist role in the marine biology space?
Yeah, definitely. I think the places that I've encountered a lot of barriers have been one, I think the master's program that I chose really has a lot of focus on conservation. And so whenever it comes to doing the hard science of it all. That's been really up to me. There hasn't been a lot of guidance there. And so while it's great for conservation, if you're interested in engaging in the hard science of it, it's kind of limited. And so I've been trying to reach out to local people here in San Diego that are doing the kind of research that I would want to do. And unfortunately, either I have to be directly affiliated with their university or they are no longer taking grad students. And so that's been something that I've been facing. I did get the chance to do some research over the summer, actually out in Florida through a wonderful program called Field School that I cannot recommend enough. They're wonderful humans. And it was really like one of the best experiences of my entire life. Like, I cannot speak highly enough of it, and highly encourage everyone, whether you're a marine biologist, a marine science educator, you're a teacher, you want to get some professional development, you're curious about shark science, sorry. Whether you're curious about shark and ray science, it's a great way to sort of get some of that hands-on experience, in a place that is going to be really, really focused on your growth, and like a place that really wants to support you and a whole human as your whole self, I would say.
That's
Uh,
great.
yeah, I really enjoyed it. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Cool. So, well, you were on that field experience. You were there for 2 weeks, right?
Yeah,
Or was it 10 days? I forget how long it was.
I ended up staying a total of 2 weeks out there because I have some family in the area, and the experience itself was about a week long. And I was living aboard a marine research vessel, and I was doing shark research every day. And what that looked like was we were going out and looking at all of the sharks that we had caught that day, and looking at just taking general measurements, doing tissue samples, looking at lactate levels, which are like stress hormones, to see if we
Cool.
can get a better idea of like their tolerance to certain stress levels, which is a whole rabbit hole that we're gonna just acknowledge and go and look at some other things here. But yeah, so their lactate levels, also looking at like if they have any parasites, right? Just like gathering so much data that informed so many other people's like research projects that they were doing. And that was really cool because I just got to experience so many different aspects of this, and really rewarding, like so rewarding and so amazing.
Oh, I'm so glad your cup is full from that experience. It sounds like you really got that hard science fix that you were looking for, that maybe you weren't getting through kind of this master's program that we're in, which is definitely more communications focused, and that's cool too. But it's great that you could kind of get that internship and field experience under your belt. I mean, since I met you a year and a half ago, you were really just, I mean, the documentary hadn't even come out yet. Like, I feel like so much has been building in the last year to like get you to this point. It's been so awesome watching all of it. I'm so proud of both of you.
We are going to take a quick break for this brief segment to dive into ways that you can take action and get involved in the fascinating world of ray conservation. Rays include majestic creatures like manta rays and devil rays. They play a crucial role in maintaining the health of our oceans. Unfortunately, they face numerous threats, including overfishing, bycatch, and habitat destruction. Manta rays in particular are highly vulnerable to these threats. They are often targeted for their gill plates, which are used in traditional Chinese medicines, despite there being no scientific evidence of their medicinal properties. This demand drives illegal and unsustainable fishing practices, putting immense pressure on manta ray populations worldwide. In 2013, the United States supported the successful listing of all manta ray species under the Convention on International Trade of Endangered Species, CITES, Appendix 2, which regulates but doesn't ban the trade of manta rays. The CITES listing was a positive step in the right direction, but mantas need greater protection as habitat loss and overfishing continue to threaten their existence. This protection is a crucial step in safeguarding these gentle giants and their habitats. Thankfully, several nonprofit organizations are dedicated to the protection and conservation of rays. One such organization is the Manta Trust. The Manta Trust focuses on research and conservation efforts aimed at better understanding and safeguarding manta rays and their habitats. Their work includes education, research, and advocacy to ensure these gentle giants continue to grace our oceans for generations to come. Another organization making a difference is the Ray of Hope's expeditions. They partner with researchers, conservationists, and local communities to conduct field research and support conservation initiatives for rays and other vulnerable marine species. Through their collaborative efforts, they strive to promote ocean conservation and inspire stewardship for the marine environment. Additionally, Defenders of Wildlife is another important organization that provides avenues for advocacy and policy work to protect marine species, including rays. By supporting these organizations, whether through donation, volunteer work, or spreading awareness, we can play a part in ensuring the survival of these magnificent creatures and advocating for the listing of the manta ray under the Endangered Species Act.
I'm excited to get into the next segment of the episode to share about diving for rays and just that journey, making documentary and what that was like, and sharing your message for being a queer conservationist and passion for shark and ray conservation. I'm so excited. So Nicole and Angel, why don't you share about what that space has been like, the journey in making that documentary, and where we can find it, and plug all that information for our listeners.
Yeah, so I think a portion of Nicole and I's individual journey that kind of overlaps is that both of us kind of grew up with this lack of like visible queer people in our respective fields. So like there weren't a whole lot of queer people who were, you know, openly and publicly in marine biology that Nicole really learned about or heard about. And for me personally, you know, growing up while everyone was watching, you know, everyone's watching Hannah Montana and all those shows, I'm watching Animal Planet and Steve Irwin and
Right there
Nature
with you.
Meerkat Manor was another one. Like, and so I've always really been into wildlife. I've always been into wildlife documentaries and things like that. And I really have always wanted to kind of like step into that sort of like Steve Irwin role, or even, you know, as I got older, like, you know, being like behind the camera and just like telling stories of wildlife and conservation through video and things like that. But, you know, same thing, like I didn't see people who were queer and who, you know, kind of looked like me, had the same background. Even before I knew I was gay, I just like, there was a disconnect, right, between me and the people that I was seeing in these respective roles. And so like both of us just kind of pursued other things. Like Nicole and I both ended up getting our degrees, our undergrad degrees in theology and things that, yeah, not involved in that anymore. But, you know, and I've always done video as like a side thing, and transitioned it from being like a side hustle to like a full-time freelance thing. But
Incredible.
yeah, I did a lot of like marketing and brand, food and beverage ads is what my professional background was in until the pandemic happened, which is where Nicole and I had a lot of time to kind of just like sit and think about our lives, as did the entire world during that time. And we kind of just like had a lot of conversations about like, man, like if you were to pursue like your childhood dream, like what would you do? And we both kind of just like had these conversations. Like,
I love these conversations. Yes.
yeah, and it transitioned from like, oh, these fun little dreams that we've dreamed about that would be really cool, like in another life, you know. But then it transitioned from that to, well, wait, what if we just did it? Like, what was stopping us, you know? Like, and it wasn't until we watched this documentary, and it was all about women in conservation, and like specifically like female pioneers in conservation, and it was really great.
Documentary.
Oh man, am I gonna name drop it here? It's a wonderful documentary. This is not me shading it at all, but it's called Women of Impact.
Okay.
It's a really, let me just refresh, like let me hammer this in. It's a wonderful documentary. And
was it lacking in representation?
That's the thing, is it really wasn't. Like there was like women featured from all over the world, all different like religious backgrounds, like, and nationalities, and like it was really, really diverse. And so we kept watching these really diverse like groups of women get introduced, and we were like, oh, they're totally going to show a queer person, and they didn't. And like, and of course that's assuming, right? Like maybe one of them is queer and they just didn't talk about it or something like that. But there was no like, hey, this is a queer woman.
Vocally, like,
Right.
obvious that this is who these roles are. And
Yeah. And so that was kind of the night that we both were like, oh my God, like this is why we didn't do this. It's because like we haven't like necessarily been quote unquote given like permission to. Like
sure,
there's so much power in seeing yourself on screen and off screen, just
I
like there's so
agree
much
with
power
that.
in just seeing yourself.
And just identifying with people that like have, yeah, the same, that look like you literally and have the same, can identify with you. And that provides you a sense of safety and security in expressing yourself in this space that you feel passionately about. Because if
Yeah.
you can't feel comfortable in who you are with the people you're around, then you're really just limiting yourself and your own talent, which is seemed to be the case for the two of you until this pandemic hit and the genesis of these ideas and childhood dreams really came to fruition. I mean, you guys are growing so much. It's so cool to see.
Thank you. Yeah, and one of the, the like leading quote of this movie is you can't be what you can't see. Um and so that like quote really stuck with us because it's like, well, what about those who like have never seen ourselves, and like we kind of like in our film we actually used that quote and spun it a little bit to say you can be what you can't see because like you have to be that person. Sometimes if you can't see yourself, you can't just wait for someone to come and show you. Like you sometimes have to be that pioneer for yourself. So that was
That
the
is
yeah, that was
so powerful. I just want to soak that in for 1 second. Can we just take that in? That is so powerful to be a trailblazer. You have to be a trailblazer, and that's what you guys are doing. You are paving the way for other people that want to see representation of themselves in this space, and I can totally relate to that too. And that's awesome. So I do remember that quote in the movie because I watched it, and I thought that was a great point. So, yes, I love that. So thank you for sharing that background behind that quote. Now I feel like I understand it and how it can relate to just being a change maker. Because at the end of the day, we all have our own passions that make us a planet person. And like you said earlier, like not having that representation earlier, maybe it deterred you, but now it doesn't matter if you're a scientist or if you have an academic background. Like you can be a storyteller for impact, and that is so powerful. What are some storytelling tactics that you like to incorporate in your work, and how is that expressed in the documentary?
I think something that I've always been a fan of with like storytelling is just like relatability. And I think there's a really fine line in like natural history storytelling specifically because you don't want to like anthropomorphize an animal or like imply that it's okay to go touch an animal when it's not okay. But I like to ride that line as close as fucking possible. Am I allowed to swear on your podcast?
Yes,
Okay,
be
good.
yourself. Be yourself.
That will happen.
Totally fine with me.
I like to ride that line super closely because I feel like, life is about like your connection with the natural world. Like we are nature, right? And so like I think that I love sharing stories about like wildlife and just like, proper natural history stories, but I also really love to like tell stories about the human connection to wildlife and
Me
um
too. I can
yeah.
relate to you so much on this, Angel.
Yeah, so I think that there's a really powerful and important piece in that when it comes to storytelling, but also just like making storytelling, accessible, relatable,
Totally.
and also not, oh my God, this is another one that I care passionately about, is not being all doomsday with it. Like
You have
I
to have some positivity for sure.
yeah, like I think that there was a time period like maybe like in the like I don't know, like 90s to like early 2000s where the conservation media was very much like we're all gonna die and it's all your fault, like, and it just like was kind of like rough to watch and
Toxic.
listen to.
Honestly,
Yeah,
toxic.
yeah, and so I think that like I don't think that it's that much of a theme quite so much in mainstream natural history media
Mhm.
anymore. But I do try and be really careful about that of like communicating like, hey, this is a threat. Like there are real dangers and threats like climate change, like certain threats that affect like species, like certain threats that affect us, but also like
Absolutely.
being like, hey, like the pressure is not all on you as one individual. Like,
Right.
like you can have a plastic straw one time. It's going to be okay, and just being like kind of positive about it. Really, like, I'm sure you will know a lot about this and feel like very strongly about this, but inspiring hope in people
Yes, of
and
course.
be passionate about inspiring it and taking that perspective. And yeah.
Hope-based action. That's
Yep.
what that is a founding principle here at Planet People. So thank you for including that. That's so important to us. And I think to your point too that, that human connection piece is so important. And I'm really happy that you provided that connection in your documentary because I feel like so oftentimes we miss that relatability component in natural history type of documentaries because we see photos of and videos of megafauna and these big charismatic species like elephants and the African savanna but what about the conservationist story? What about the person fighting extinction on the front lines so these documentaries can even happen because of these preserved natural spaces that might be in national parks or for example Gombe National Park was preserved because of Jane Goodall's research with chimpanzees and she is a pioneer in showing that we can have that connection to chimps and that we are quite literally related to them and it's really cool that you can share Nicole's story, diving for rays and provide that human connection that I feel like is really missing sometimes. And I try to give that through my own social media presence, and it almost feels a little intimidating sometimes because I see other biologists online who have photos of just animals or wildlife photographers, and they have this, yeah, the photos really is what it is. But what about the person behind the lens?
Right.
And that's why I love your guys' story because you come together as this power couple and showcase what you're made of in this awesome documentary. I feel like we haven't even fully unpacked what the documentary is, the focus of it, and I think we should also kind of define queer ecology for our listeners who might not even know what that is. I was thinking about that earlier because I introduced the podcast episode about that. So yeah, I guess if we want to talk about what the focus of the film is, and then how queer ecology is intertwined with it.
Yeah. So the focus of the film is basically just following Nicole's journey to becoming a marine biologist. And we do this kind of by following her taking steps to get scuba certified. So there's this main, plot of her learning how to be scuba certified, but it intertwines this overarching journey of her trying to just become a scientist, getting accepted into grad school, going on to do things in the future, all that stuff. And so throughout the film, you kind of get to learn about Nicole's past and the challenges that kind of prevented her from getting here. And then you also get to learn what things helped her get to where she is now and things like that. So yeah, and the whole team behind it was literally just me, Nicole, and my friend Nova West, who was the underwater DP for the film. So they shot all the underwater stuff. They're also trans, non-binary. So really, really fantastic team.
I love that.
Yeah.
Truly trailblazers.
Thank you. And
Trailblazers.
then and then as for queer ecology, this is something that the film itself doesn't touch too much on, but that Nicole and I just feel really strongly and passionately about. And the basics of queer ecology is basically just I like to compare it to my identity as being non-binary, right? So non-binary means that you're not necessarily on the, spectrum of gender. So it's not that you're in the middle, it's that you're just kind of floating outside of the line, right? You're outside of the binary.
I love that.
And queer ecology really takes that framework. So it's basically looking outside of the boundaries that we have had in science and biology through these gendered and maybe biased lenses that we a lot of times don't know that we've had. And instead kind of is well, what if we looked at it in different perspectives and maybe, tried to get rid of those harmful perspectives. So an example is how scientists only recently learned that the female sharks actually chase after the male sharks and they get to choose who they want to mate with, and it's not the traditional Darwin model of the males chase the females. And it could be as simple as that or more complex as learning that some animals change gender or
yes.
Gender biological
What
sex.
fish species? Nicole was telling me this recently that there's a fish that changes gender. Like,
Mm-hmm.
do explain that, because that is the crux of queer ecology.
You wanna
Yeah, I can explain this one. And so this is a fish that is native to Southern California. It is the California sheep's head. And it's kind of like a more charismatic fish for being on this side of the ocean. It's like kind of red and it's got some cool markings on it. And they all start out, they're all born female. And then what happens is in this little group, there is one male. And then once this male sort of like passes away or like goes and becomes a part of another group, the largest female will then start to transition and become the male of the group. And so that is just one example of one of the things that you can kind of like see in nature of like queer ecology. I think some other important perspectives of this too is that like there so much of queer ecology and like feminist ecology really allows for the person who is using this lens to consider like other perspectives, like Angel said, that are outside the binary, but also perspectives that may not inherently have a lot of like environmental impact or value, and at least at first glance, but then upon like looking into them more, you might actually find that they are more impactful. And so it's one of these things where whenever I'm talking to people about chasing their dreams and doing the things that they love to do, one of the things that I like to say is that no one can do this thing, this project, this idea, can do this exactly the way that you're going to do it, because no one has your brain, no one has your perspective, no one has your life experience. And so inherently you're going to bring things to the table that no one else is going to be able to bring, and that makes you valuable. And our society, I think, has a really skewed idea of what holds value, and so I think that in and of itself also is pretty important and impactful. And yeah, I think you and I have actually talked a little bit about that too, Natalie.
Definitely.
Yeah.
If you guys can dive into kind of helping people who feel separate from nature feel more connected to nature based on the fact that we are mammals and we don't have to live within the norms that we set for ourselves, because the ocean doesn't do that. And so if we can understand how, life works beyond the gender norms in nature, how can we see ourselves as connected in that capacity by removing these restrictions? And in what way will that help us feel that we are one? Because at Planet People, I really believe that that connection to nature is the key to life, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I have some thoughts.
Go for it.
Okay. I have some thoughts. So I think there's a lot of talk in media right now about decolonizing or re-indigenizing our like framework for how we move about the world and all of these practices. And so I think when we talk about how this idea that like we as humans are a part of nature, I think that is a way of kind of changing our framework to like really go back to like this indigenous idea that like you are a part of the land, like you are a part of your surroundings, you are inherently going to affect nature in the same way that nature is going to affect you. And so I think by sort of changing our framework and getting away from this idea that nature is something that we can take from and that we can extract from, and is really something that like is going to take care of us. If we take care of it, we can really begin to understand that nature has inherent value. And even in the classes that Natalie and I have taken, there's different frameworks for going about the best way to communicate conservation needs and actions and campaigning. And one of these is that you can go to these folks that are impacting the environment negatively, and you can give them a monetary outline of exactly how what they're doing is affecting the environment. And that may be effective, but it doesn't change the core issue that there's this framework that says that this is okay. And so I think a lot of the change that we want to see happens when people can authentically connect to themselves and connect to their local nature spaces, their local green spaces. And that's a really big reason that I loved the work that I do, is because it's all about that. And so I really think that that's when we're talking about ways that we can facilitate this piece of relatability and connection. I think it kind of starts there. But Angela, I'm sure you have other ideas as a filmmaker. Also.
No, yeah, that was great. What I was gonna say is that like when you're talking about this like whole queer ecology, queer biology concept, you have to be careful because like it is a very different thing to say that like I am a non-binary person and that is my gender identity, and say like, oh, that fish is transgender. It's like you got to be careful when you use like the language. But the basic concept is that like nature doesn't have boxes, so you shouldn't either, like because
Period.
like we period like because like we are nature, like we are a part of nature, and like what sets us apart is that we do have morals, and we do have
different value systems
and a higher intelligence, if you want to put it that way. But this principal concept of like the world is so much bigger and so much more expansive than like we give ourselves credit for, and we are so intertwined into that, and finding connecting with the freedom in that, and connecting with I feel like that's why it's like so important to like get outside and experience nature and experience wildlife, because you really will just like discover like who you really are like in those spaces. That's what I was gonna say.
well
Yeah.
said.
I think when we talk about this overlap of like human connection and conservation, I think a lot of this is also recognizing that by going outside and immersing yourself in your native wildlife, you're realizing also like that a lot of these conservation issues are also like human health issues too. And so you realize that these concepts like really overlap a lot. And that's kind of where we get into the environmental justice aspect of conservation as well, which could go for a whole other podcast.
That's true.
So
Wow. Well, I can't really think of a better response. I mean, that was so well said. Both of you are so eloquently spoken about how you can really just be a part of nature, and that's freeing, and embracing that connection gives you this out of box feeling, right? And we all have a role to fill, and we can find that in nature, especially as planet people who just, our foundation is really built on that curiosity and cultivating that connection to inspire and promote a greater impact, to protect these natural spaces and protect ourselves in the process. Because if we don't have our land, then we don't have that connection to understanding that we are one, really. Cool. Wow, guys, this has been so fun. So thank you guys so much for sharing all of your input about queer ecology and what it's been like embracing this role as a marine biologist and natural film documentary producer. Angel, you guys are power couple for sure, killing it. And to everyone listening, we will plug all of their information about the documentary and their social media at the end of the episode and in the caption. But before we wrap up, I like to ask all of my guests what their favorite environmental quotes are. And I'm not sure if you have any picked out, but you mentioned some that were in the film, I remember. I don't know if you wanted to speak on anything else, but
I have a quote.
Other way. Yeah. Okay. Let's hear it.
It's not like per se a direct quote, but it's actually a quote that I learned. It's actually a quote that I had and decided that I wanted to incorporate it into like all aspects of my life, not just conservation. But I was taking, of all things, I was taking this training. And one of the things that this person said was that when you're trying to like authentically engage with someone when you're on like a program, right? Because this was at work. One of the key foundations to navigating conflict or, kind of like building authenticity within how you show up in a space and within the program that you're on is that you want to do things with people, not to them. And so this is, it's not like an official quote, but the person who said it, his name was Macedonio, and such a cool name, such a cool human. And it just comes from this framework or this idea that when you're talking at someone or you're doing something that is going to affect them, it's better to, instead of come at it from maybe like a top-down perspective or from a perspective of like, this is something that you are going to do, it's better to come alongside that person, to level with them, and to authentically recognize the humanness of the situation and to do things with them. So include them in the process. And that's something that's sort of like a framework that I really, really hold and stand by when it comes to just like navigating conflict in general, but also like engaging youth, engaging communities, engaging folks in conservation work, just across the board, including people in that process so that they have that sense of belonging and that sense of connection is easier facilitated. So
Thank you. Yeah, that speaks a lot to the power of collaboration and using a bottom up approach to learning and listening to other people and applying their input and um, yeah, instead of talking at them, right? As we wrap up the episode, are there any final words that you would like to share for those who might want to get involved and volunteer with marine conservation efforts? I always like to offer some sort of guidance for call to action for people to take for our listeners listening in. Nicole or Angel, if you have anything to say.
If you're interested in more of the like conservation storytelling side of like science communication and stuff like that, a resource that I always recommend to people is Jackson Wild. They are primarily a media awards organization, but they're also a nonprofit that does a lot of programming and work for just people in the industry of natural history filmmaking. They have an online platform called the Jackson Wild Collective where you can get connected with people, and also they have like master classes and grant opportunities and things like that. They hold a summit every single year where everybody in the industry kind of comes together. It's like kind of like the Oscars of this industry. It's really, except it's way more like a summer camp. It's very fun. But that's how I kind of got my break in this industry, jumping from advertisement and marketing into natural history filmmaking. So I would definitely recommend them for a resource.
yeah. Or if you're interested more in like the community engagement and advocacy aspect of things, I'd encourage you to learn about your local wildlife, learn about the sort of like the way that climate change is like affecting your like native species, and to also look into the local organizations that are trying to do something to combat it. A lot of the times they're holding volunteer events, they're holding restoration events. If you're in San Diego, I really recommend like the National Marine Mammal Foundation. I really recommend Surfrider, Wild Coast. These are all folks that are doing really, really wonderful things when it comes to conserving our coastlines. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. I mean, great options for those listening who are interested in science communication and that in the field kind of volunteer, feel good, boots on the ground work. So thank you guys so much for sharing and giving all your input, inspiring our listeners to take action and show up for yourself in nature and embrace the multifaceted identities that we all have as humans and connect with nature and be one. So I feel like that was really a great theme for our episode and perfect talk for our coastal conservation series and diving for rays. So make sure to check out all of their latest work. Nicole and Angel, if you want to plug your information, Instagram handles, latest work, anything for our listeners to find you after the episode.
Yeah. So if you want to watch the documentary, it is available to stream for free on WaterBear Network. It's totally free to create an account. Yeah, if you want to keep up with what Nicole and I are doing, I'm mostly on Instagram. Nicole's not really a social media person, but if you want to follow me, you'll get both of our news if you follow me. My username is angelmorris.edit on Instagram. And that's pretty much it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's about what I got too.
Perfect. Well, thank you guys so much. I think that concludes our episode for today. So to everyone listening, make sure you follow along in their journey and stay tuned for more.
Stay tuned for our upcoming episodes as we continue to explore the incredible world of marine conservation and our dedicated individuals and organizations working to protect our oceans. We hope that by listening to this podcast, you will be inspired to connect with nature and become a steward of the planet by getting involved and taking action with your local community conservation organization. Until next time, stay positive, Planet People. Thank you to my team here at Planet People. This episode was produced by Natalie Jane Sybil, Coral Carson, and Hugh Carr. Edited by Coral Carson. Theme song by Hugh Carr under the artist name Flama. Thank you, team.